all over the world, probably, could they?
Anywhere.
Excellent, just checking. We are in the global interweb. It's very exciting. So, it is. Yorkshire is the centre of the universe. So just to go around the table so we can just introduce ourselves. My name is Susan Hinchcliffe. I am leader of Bradford and chair of West Yorkshire Transport. Simon, who are you?
Simon Pope, Director of Transport Capital Programmes.
James Mowbray from Community Services.
Councillor Peter Carlill. I'm a Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee, focusing on bus and active travel.
Councillor Eric Firth, Kirkland's Councillor, but also the Deputy Chair of the Transport Committee, focusing on rail.
Councillor Exor Sean, Portfolio Holder on Bradford Council for Regeneration, Planning and Transport, and apologies, Charlie, need to leave earlier. Right on.
Councillor Matthew Morley, Portfolio Holder for Planning, Transportation and Highways, Wakefield Metropolitan District Council.
Councillor Tony Wallace, Wakefield Council.
Councillor Adele Ray, Councillor for Bramley and Stanley in Leeds.
Natalie Sykes, West Yorkshire Business Board, Private Representative.
Councillor Kate Revilius, Exec Member for Transport at City of York Council.
Jacob Williamson, Transport Engagement Lead for Wakefield Council.
Councillor Raymond Jones, Leeds City Council, representing Horsforth.
Paul Turner from Transdev.
Kim Kane from Arriva.
Kaylee Ingham from First.
Andrew McGuinness, CPT, Trade Body for Bus and Coach.
Councillor Tony McGrath, Kirklees Council.
Councillor Joe Atkinson, Calderdale Council.
Councillor Neil Buckley, Leeds City Council.
Councillor Moses Crook, I'm Deputy Leader at Kirklees and also Portfolio Holder for Transport and Housing.
Councillor Matthew McLaughlin from Con Valley in Kirklees. I'm the Transport Engagement Lead for Kirklees.
Councillor Andrew Pinnock, Councillor for Cleckheaton, right in the middle of West Yorkshire, Kirklees Council.
Councillor Sarah Courtney, I'm Lead Member on Calderdale Council for Regeneration and Transport.
Councillor Katie Kimber, Transport Engagement Lead for Calderdale Council.
Councillor Chris Still, Wolfdale Ward in Bradford.
Councillor Caroline Firth, Transport Engagement Lead for Bradford.
Hello everybody, I'm Helen Elton, Head of Transport Policy at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
And hi, I'm Dave Haskins, the Strategic Head of Major Projects at West Yorkshire Combined Authority.
Tim Taylor, Director of Transport Services at the Combined Authority.
And Simon Wobton, Executive Director for Transport.
Thank you very much. So as you can see, there's elected members from all across West Yorkshire here to discuss transport, and we're all councillors who get a lot of mail in our inboxes about buses in particular, but also trains, and that's why we're all here to make sure that we find out what's going on and able to feed that back to residents, as well as provide residents' views to operators who are gathered here today for later in the agenda. So apologies for absence.
We have apologies for absence from councillors Andrew Loy, Joe Wheatley and Jonathan Pryor. And can I just mention, obviously it's quite a packed room. We do have nameplates for the rail representatives when that item comes up, and they're just on the counter at the end. So when you switch over, just to be mindful of that. Okay.
Okay, so we'll have to have a name swap minute. Fine. But if we can do that like a relay race as quickly as possible, that would be great, because it's a tight agenda with a lot to get through. Declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest, have we got any? Nobody indicating, but you can always let us know throughout the meeting if anything occurs. Exempt information, I don't think there is any exempt information today. No, absolutely. And then minutes of the meeting of the Transport Committee held on the 14th of October. Those have been circulated. Have anybody got any comments or questions on those? No? Lovely. Well, in that case, can I ask we accept as a correct record of that meeting? All those please in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That is carried. And then the first substantive item then we've got in the report is Passenger Experience Report Bus. And I'm pleased to welcome here today the operators of the buses in West Yorkshire, and indeed smaller operators who CPT as well. They've already introduced themselves here today. Shall we go through the report first and then open for questions, and then perhaps operators, I'll probably do it from that way. So report first, and then we'll ask for questions from the floor, and then give operators an opportunity to answer those if we can. So off you go, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for the opportunity to present this report. Members will note that the report takes us through a number of items in terms of trends around passenger behaviour, patronage and so forth, and then provides further information around activity on bus stations, passenger charter and bus lines work more generally. Under passenger trends, you will note that patronage has largely stabilised and had plateaued in a number of instances across the region. The paper puts forward a number of reasons for this, including some changes in behaviour across under 19s and under 26s, but also there's an anticipated impact from the closure of Bradford Interchange and the movement of patronage within Bradford as a result of those changes too. The paper then leads on and gives information in respect of patronage across the region relative to other parts of the country, and indicates 119.5 million trips across the region. You will note that as a proportion of passenger journeys per head is lower than some other combined authority areas, but is of itself higher than South Yorkshire, one of our nearest neighbours. It also indicates the consistent position in terms of elderly passenger travel, and certainly pre-COVID recovery now that only stands at 68%, and this is a trend that is seen across not just West Yorkshire but other parts of the north and England more generally. In terms of network performance and reliability, I shall just take you through some of the highlights from the report in that. You will note that across 2024 we are seeing between 95.5% and 97%, which is lower than the Traffic Commissioner standard of 99.5%. Punctuality of itself, again, not dissimilar in terms of a range between 86 and 92%, again lower than the 95% expected position from the Traffic Commissioner. Again, there are a number of reasons for this. I shall not go into them in detail, but happy to take questions that might be specific to your areas, but also look to the operators to offer some thoughts on the causal factors for those as well. In terms of bus station work, members will be aware that we were about to start work in Dewsbury, and construction on that will start in March of this year, and that will include a range of improvements for passengers, so improved information, improved CCTV and security features, and wider amenities available for members of the public to make use of. Members will also be aware of the closure of Bradford Interchange during 2024, and this was reopened successfully on the 5th of January of this year, and the station is now fully operational, with only a small number of services still retained on street, whilst the remaining works in terms of the resurfacing of the interchange is being complete. As part of that reopening, there was a significant effort from combined authority staff and from local authority partners as well in ensuring passengers found access to that information and to the services in a timely manner, and that they were not disrupted or inconvenienced as a result of those changes. It's also worth noting, not necessarily reported directly within the report, but that was also within the run-up to the start of the City of Culture events, which commenced that following weekend in the city centre. We also clearly unplanned, but had to deal with snow as a result of that, and you may recall a significant snow disruption in the run-up to the reopening of the interchange, but thankfully that was not disruptive in the sense of the interchange itself being reopened. Moving on to network developments, members will be aware of some of the challenges faced by Aviva in terms of their driver availability and vehicle shortages, further compounded by their issues with their depot. And again, I shall not elaborate on this too much further and perhaps invite Aviva to comment any further. We've been working closely with Aviva to ensure that the impact of that is minimised as best possible, and a number of changes to contracts and service delivery were made at the start of this month, with some further changes coming in February, with some new operators operating services under contract on behalf of the Combined Authority to reduce the demand on resources for Arriva and to improve their existing service stability and punctuality as well as reliability. In terms of I shall move on to bus passenger charter quickly within the report. Members will be aware that this was agreed as part of the enhanced partnership under the Bus Alliance. I'm pleased to say that the charter has now been finished. The report said it will be published in January. It is actually due to be published today. So we're confident that that will actually start to give passengers further confidence in the system and making sure that they know their rights and also obligations that they are able to access. Not least in amongst that last bus commitments from operators in terms of cancelling of last services and the recompense of taxi fares under those circumstances. I shall briefly touch on roadside displays and timetable updates. So there's been a significant amount of work both in terms of preparation for the reopening of Bradford Interchange, but also in terms of work ahead of the changes for Arriva, which has commenced throughout the year. And we're also making sure that those timetables are out on stops and across the region, across our bus stops and shelters, as quickly as possible through that process. Under ticketing, members will be aware that we've made some changes through our M-card system, and there's been a number of campaigns that have been run to try and encourage further uptake of M-card tickets and products more generally. As well as that campaign to encourage people to return to Bradford Interchange as well. Chair, I think that's probably the majority of the report, and in the interest of time, happy to pass back to you, invite comments and then observations from the operators. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So lots in there. Good to see the Park and Ride is getting back up to almost where it used to be, but it's taken a long time, hasn't it? The COVID pandemic has a long tail of impact. So we've got Wakefield members wanting to speak. I quite understand that. So we'll have a councillor, sorry, I can't see your surname, sorry, councillor. Still can't see it. Jones, thank you, sorry, Raymond. Councillor Jones and then
a question
Morley,
and a serious issue that we've avoided for a long, long time, in my view. At 7 o'clock, as we all know, everybody goes home. Nothing happens. So I had a resident last week who bus didn't fail to turn up. It turned over to the next day's timetable. So I want to know what that passenger does to enable her to get a taxi. Bear in mind this is an older person who doesn't have a mobile phone. There's no contact numbers on the bus stop. So I believe that this, in actual fact, is a safeguarding issue for older residents. And I'm repeatedly saying this now. When are we going to make it so that people understand they can get a taxi, how they get a taxi? And two, is it really acceptable at 7 o'clock that nobody can contact anybody about whether their bus is going to turn up or not? This is a safeguarding issue, and I believe it's a breach of the Charter, to be absolutely honest. And I've asked this for the last 2 meetings. It's the third meeting I've asked this. And at some point, if somebody's going to turn around and say, we're going to do nothing about it, that's fine. That's fine. But then I'll be absolutely honest, I will put that in the public domain, because that's the question I'm being asked. So I'd like an answer either today or in the next week or two about what we're going to do about it. If we're going to do nothing, say nothing, that's fine. But be prepared for what will come back. It's
so
not acceptable.
Absolutely, Councillor Jones. Councillor Jones, this is in the public domain, so do feel assured you've already put it in the public domain. Obviously, very strong views there from Councillor Jones. Have we got a response for him?
Yeah, no, absolutely. With the Charter, that will clearly be promoted and made available to members of the public. We are intending to put that detail also on bus stops and in our bus stations. If people don't have a mobile phone, we can go and talk to people in our travel centres and talk to them, and they can talk them through the process. The following day, on receipt of that ticket, the obligation to recompense the customer is on behalf of the operator, or not on behalf of the Combined Authority. So this is a commitment from operators to participate in that process.
So I suppose it's a question of how they do it, isn't it, really? Because it can't be too bureaucratic. Obviously, if they're there, as Councillor Jones says, when the bus has gone, or it's not arrived, in fact, how do they take that up?
So the process is for them to speak to the operator that cancelled the service, and it is for the operator to reimburse the person in question. We can help facilitate that process. I'm very happy to be involved in that process, but it is a relationship between the passenger and the operator.
Okay, Councillor Jones, do you want to come back on that? And I'll bring Councillor.
Right. So I'm at 10:30 at night. I'm an older person who's vulnerable, right? So my bus, it's turned over to the next day, so I assume it's not coming. I don't have a mobile phone. So if I did have a mobile phone, who would I contact? And the answer is there's nobody to contact. That is the point I'm making. Everybody going home at 7:30 or 7 o'clock when they go home. There is no contact between the operators and the public. That's the point I'm making. It's all right saying you get a taxi, but not everybody can afford a taxi. We'll point that bit out. Also, the overhead, which we all know is not particularly fit for purpose, if I'm being absolutely honest, is my point. It really is, what does somebody do at 10:30 at night, and how do they contact the operator if they've got a mobile phone? Because it isn't there. That's the point I'm making. Surely, common sense says whenever the bus is running, there should be a contact point. That's the point I'm trying to get to. It's not complicated, because because that way we can have a contact. If there's no contact, people don't know. And particularly what we are doing is we're leaving vulnerable people in very difficult positions, and I find that not acceptable.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. So it is the how that I think, if you're a resident who's in that situation, how do they do that and how do they know what to do? And bus operators, bus drivers need to know how it works as well to be able to advise people, don't they? Anybody in the bus station. So it is the how I think that we're struggling with here. Councillor Morley, obviously another Wakefield councillor, would you like to come in on?
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we will be looking at how the reductions and the cuts, and how you want to call them, that Arriva have taken place in early January. Will that be stabilising the network in the Wakefield district? So that's what obviously we'll be monitoring, looking at as we move forward over the next couple of weeks and months. But through them changes, I've had parents contacting me regarding school bus services that are commercial, the Outwood Grange service that from some parts it's a 10, 15, maximum 20-minute journey to Outwood Grange. It's now taking over an hour, a very convoluted. You put two buses together and they're going on a tour of Northwest Wakefield, the district. Kids having to get there just before 7 o'clock on a morning to make sure they can catch that bus. Dark winter nights, it's not very acceptable for parents, and they are very, very concerned about that. Similar with also out with Crofton High School, parents living around the Featherstone Street House area, that bus is absolutely filled to capacity when it's coming on a morning. It's a double decker. Kids can't get on. Sometimes it's a single decker. So that is really causing, my email is quite inundated at the moment. I know conversations with our officers have been had with Arriva, but that's something that I want to raise here today. Through the changes you have made, that's caused many concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Does any other Wakefield councillors want to? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking back up on the service changes, I'd like to know if there's a plan or review for these services to be reinstated at some point in the future, and while these changes have been brought in to try and make the overall sort of services, the system sort of more reliable. We have been here a few times before already, and our bus network just keeps getting cut and cut. And while we've seen from other operators sort of improvements in terms of driver retention and improved services, Arriva seems to be the only one which is still struggling, and I would like to understand what Arriva thinks are the problems to retaining staff and recruiting them. Thank you.
I had Councillor Firth. Councillor Wallace, did you indicate? I can't remember now. Yeah. Yes, you did. So, Councillor Wallace, do you want to come in then as a Wakefield councillor, and then I'll bring Councillor Firth.
Thank you. Just to carry on what the issues in as you say, in Wakefield, we've got the school issue about the students, and it's so bad that it is being talked about as well as on social media in areas which are away from the schools as well. But I'm very concerned about the changes of evening services, where services which run once every 30 minutes are now being down to 1 an hour. And I'm also concerned about where passengers have to get 2 buses at that time. because because cutting down the services then, it increases the waiting time. Now, although I have a car, I try to travel by bus, and a month ago I spent a whole week, which I do every so often, only travelling in a car if I absolutely have to. And on a Sunday, I went to one bus station, and the bus which was supposed to go didn't show up. It didn't show on the system as being cancelled. It just didn't show up. That's a Riva bus. So I had to wait another hour for the next bus, not knowing whether that was going to turn up or not. I just wished it was. And that's the kind of passenger experience what we're having. But passengers are now saying when a bus doesn't show up on time, is it going to be shown? Is it late or has it been cancelled? The app is wonderful, by the way. I've been shown how to use the app, and that's great at telling me if a bus is cancelled or running late, but that's not a substitute for buses running on time. I've also known in 2024, I know 4 bus drivers who have left. They're ex-bus drivers now. They left. What's coming up over from them is Arriva isn't a company they'd like to stay with, but they don't give me the reasons why, by the way. But that's their comment. So it's just getting over this, that especially on an evening and Sundays now, the service has become to such an extent that passengers don't have the confidence to actually use it. Even taking a taxi, although it'll cost more money, but they'd rather do that than wait for whether a bus will show up or not.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Firth, do you want to just come in, and I'm going to go to Arriva, then I'll pick up on some of those.
Thank you, Chair. My question will allow Arriva to take a deep breath because I've got a few questions to answer. But my comment was on Tim's report, and I make no apologies for being parochial. 3.12, I'm just delighted that we're about to start work on Dewsbury Bus Station. It's been a long time coming, a long time in the planning, and it will be truly magnificent, I'm sure, when it's completed. And thank you to all concerned for making this possible. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Firth. A good point to just end that little section on. Kim, for Arriva, obviously we've raised a few concerns there about services, our service is going to be restored, confidence of passengers, and I'd like probably each of the operators, and we can round to you to answer the question of Councillor Jones about how each of you are making sure that passengers are aware of their rights under the passenger charter. So Kim, do you want to come in on the Wakefield colleagues' concern?
Yes, thank you. There's quite a few things to go through there, so I'll take each in turn, but I'll try to give as much information as I can in this brief section, but happy to have conversations afterwards if that's of help. So in terms of the changes that came in on the 5th of January, like yourself, we're clearly monitoring how that's being implemented and what effect that's taking place. In the first week of the changes, so we commenced on the 5th of January, we saw that our staff-related lost mileage halved. In the second week, it was cut further, so we were down to around 30%. We do expect that small amount to continue through till the 22nd of February, which is when some of our contracts come to an end. But as of the 22nd of February, we should then have enough drivers to cover all of our services as scheduled. We do, however, have some vehicle issues that have come to light, and Arriva have acted quite swiftly in that in order to bring in newer vehicles from outside of Yorkshire. So I've got some 2-year-old vehicles coming up for another part of the business. We've purchased some second-hand vehicles which are relatively new, at half the age of some of our existing fleet. So those vehicles are starting to come into the area already. You may see some of them in a different livery to Arriva. We will get them painted, but the primary focus at the moment is to get them on the road and make sure that we are delivering the service we said we would to our customers. In terms of our punctuality performance, when we compare ourselves in Yorkshire to the rest of the UK, we actually, of the buses that do operate, of course, we have the highest performing punctuality in the country. So our buses aren't reliable, but they are punctual based on the area that we're operating in. And by that, I mean that, for example, our punctuality is higher than you see in Greater Manchester, and that they're stats that are available for people to see. In terms of Outward Grange and school buses, we worked really closely with the Combined Authority when we were discussing the changes that were going to come. and one of the real focus areas was to make sure that every child that could get to school on bus when we did the changes would still be able to get to school by bus following the changes. And we had to make some really difficult decisions with that. One of those decisions did mean handing one of those services over to another operator, and then we were left with the two outward services. We were faced with a position where we would have to cancel one of those two school buses, but having looked at the passenger loads that we were carrying pre-Christmas would be able to be accommodated on a single deck bus. Now, we do know that school children don't like to sit down and don't like to sit next to each other. They often get on a bus and put a bag on the seat next to them. So we're doing a bit of an awareness campaign with the school children to say, you know, please allow people to sit next to you, and please make sure that you are going right to the back of the bus. That is a challenge, and we have got people out monitoring the loadings to make sure that they aren't breaching the capacity. I am aware that there was one day, one service, where a single deck was operated. That was when we had the poor weather, and we struggled to get enough double decks out to cover that. But every day since then, it has been operated by a double deck. I'm not aware of us leaving any passengers behind because of capacity. So although they are busy buses, they're not meeting capacity. In terms of Councillor Williams' questions around reinstatement, we aren't looking to reinstate at the moment. So our focus at the minute is on stabilising the network, making sure we've got strong delivery and delivering the service that the customers want. Obviously, anything that we have cut, any other operator is you know, that it's an open market. They can choose to register those services, or alternatively, if the combined authority thought there was sufficient demand, then they could look to tender. But as things stand today, we are not looking to reinstate the services that we had to cut. In terms of driver retention, we have a number of activities going on at the moment. One of those involves the fleet and the investment into the fleet. We're actively working with the combined authority around a new depot for Wakefield, because those who are from Wakefield will know that that depot has had to close and is basically boarded up at the moment while we find somewhere else to operate from. We do have a retention plan, which we will shortly be announcing to our colleagues, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate for me to announce that here to this group today before I've told our staff. But we are working on that in the background, and that should be available soon. And a lot of that is around our new starters and how we retain them within the business. We also spoke about the school issue again. The evening and Sunday journeys, every service that we cut was done based on passenger numbers. So as part of that process of deciding what would need to be cut, we did provide the combined authority with the passenger numbers to show that we were cutting where very, very few people were actually travelling by bus. We have to remember that the focus of this activity was to restore reliability, and we did have to make difficult decisions where, for example, a small number of people were travelling on one service. If we didn't cut that service, we would have to drop services in the middle of the day, which would impact many, many more people. And we can see that in our passenger numbers. Our passenger numbers haven't dropped as a result of these cuts. We've spoke about needing to get 2 buses at a time. Again, the decision was based upon keeping a service or cutting a service and delivering reliability. As I say, the focus was on reliability. We have to deliver what we say we're going to deliver. Cancellations are being processed through our systems. We have identified a number of new colleagues who weren't quite doing that correctly in the system. So last week I had all of them trained on how to do that correctly in the system. And then my customer services team are now auditing those cancellations to make sure that when a customer rings up and says a bus hasn't operated, we're checking to make sure that has been cancelled in the system correctly. And I've had very good feedback on that to say that that is now happening much more regularly, as it should. And I think that covered everything.
Passenger charter?
Oh, sorry, yes, passenger charter. So we do publicise that on our website, and we have various means of contacting us. They're all displayed on our website. So people can text, they can email, they can contact us on social media, they can phone us. But in terms of the taxi, if the last bus fails to operate, then they don't have to interact with us. The customer can simply phone a taxi, order a taxi, and then as long as they keep hold of that receipt, we would then reimburse them after the event.
Thank you. I think it'd be worth actually, if we can gather that data of how many people do that, that gives us an indication of how successful the communication is. So I don't know if the operators can perhaps collect that for us on a quarterly basis or something, so that then we can figure out whether it's working. There's other councillors indicating as well, so I'm going to move. Jacob, is it Councillor Wilson? Is it very quick? Because obviously
Yeah, we just come back on. I appreciate you can't raise like the details of the retention plan with us before you've told staff, but my question was specifically what you think the problems are with retention, not like what you're going to do about it.
Thanks. Yeah, just very briefly, there's a few things that I touched on. So the condition of our vehicles, so the reliability of the vehicles, the depot in Wakefield that's closed, you know, that has an impact on people, and we are reviewing our paying conditions as well, although, you know, that's part of a bigger picture.
Thank you very much. So, indicating I've got Councillor Courtney and Councillor Kimber next.
Thank you very much, Chair. The plateauing of bus patronage is a bit disappointing, particularly with the introduction of service enhancements under the BSIP programme. Obviously, it's hoped in the longer term that bus franchising will help reverse this trend, although in Calderdale that's going to be a little while. But I think it's really clear that we all want people to use buses more for a whole variety of reasons, and we clearly need to work in partnership, both the combined authority, local authorities and bus companies, the bus operators. So I think the issues that residents talk about are frequency and reliability. I think we all know about that, and we're told that frequency is down to passenger numbers. There's appears to be a bit of a negative feedback loop around this. So, you know, if buses aren't reliable or they're not really frequent enough, then it drives numbers down. So we need to sort of see how we can reverse that trend. So I was just wondering if there are measures which so as I'm saying, you know, we're in partnership. So what measures could we as local authorities take to help promote reliability, which hopefully then would help drive up patronage, which then maybe could even increase frequency? So I'm just sort of wanting to know, so rather than having this negative loop and negative feedback, what is it that you know we could do as local authorities? And obviously we're all cash strapped, but you know, if there was a wish list of things, what is it that we could do to help in our part to help drive numbers up as well?
Thank you, Councillor Courtney. That's that is the golden question, isn't it? Really, how do we do this? Councillor Kimber, do you want to come in with your questions rather than Councillor Buckley, and then we'll.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. I'll make them really, really quick. So, one around the timetable displays and the delays and the timetables in bus stops, when they're going to be updated. We've got bus stops from September with that haven't got the new timetables in, which is quite a long time for people to wait. Other question around, because I'm new to the committee and we're working through issues with residents, what is the best way of dealing with those specific issues and getting the various people in the room, like the combined authority, the bus operators, ward councillors and things like that, how to resolve specific route issues that we've got? Is there a mechanism for doing that, and how do we get that done really efficiently and quickly? Third thing, really, really quickly, it relates to TLC and the bus pricing. So we've got TLC buses that do quite a lot of our rural routes, and on a particular route it's a different day ticket price to the other routes, and some passengers are being refused that rate and being given the day rate for the other buses. So there's lots of confusion for our residents around that. So just how we can get those communications out to drivers and get that, you know, connecting up better for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Buckley, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, on page 8 and 9, and this partly follows on from what Councillor Courtney was just saying. There's a very disappointing number of 66% of pre-pandemic baseline in the student column there on page 8. And then on page 9, there's an interesting comment. West Yorkshire patronage in the year ending March 24 was 29% lower than in 2009. And it was just to reinforce the point, really, that particularly with the student figure, if we're not getting people onto buses at that time of life, they're probably not going to get onto buses at any time of life. So it's just to underline this situation about with franchising looming, unless passenger numbers go up, we're going to be left holding a very big baby.
Thank you. I mean, I think I've always understood that franchising and no franchising, this public subsidy inevitably is increasing for buses, so you might as well control the network. I think that's what obviously we've learnt through that consultation phase. So some good questions there by colleagues. I think, can we ask first of all on the how we organise the meetings? I'm sure you the bus engagement leads in local areas, but have you got a mechanism where that can happen, as Councillor Kimber raised?
Yeah, so just to pick up on those questions, Chair. So in terms of the old timetables, so we have had some delays in getting them on street. If there are specific examples, so September's much older than I was expecting, so please get in touch with me direct and I can pick up specific locations. With that in mind, it is our plan to have all the timetables updated by the end of February, particularly with a focus on Aviva services, but not exclusively. And part of that delay, as described in the report, was from work required to get Bradford Interchange reopened. On specific issues more generally, engagement through the local and transport engagement leads is the right route, but again, I'm happy to be approached directly. You are probably aware I'm relatively new in post, but my remit covers all bus service delivery. And happy to pick up with any councillors direct on specific issues. Some of the ones that have been mentioned already around school services, for example, have already been brought to my attention, so happy to take those and field those direct. Specifically on the point around TLC as well, as that's new to me, but I'm happy to have that conversation with you in person and very willing to speak to them direct, because that doesn't sound like a situation that we would support or endorse. Thank you, Chair.
Andrew, is that something you wanted to come in on?
I would have to have more details on that, so if you can feedback through perhaps to Tim, and then either directly through Tim or myself, we can speak to TLC and understand what's happening there. Certainly doesn't sound right, but we just need to know the detail on that.
And then the big question is, how do we increase patronage? So we could all have a whole meeting on that, to be quite honest. However, which one of officers wants to start on that? Then I'll go to each of the operators in turn to give me your golden points about what you would do to do this. Thank you.
Chair, could I just come in very, very briefly as a start? Whilst the numbers may appear disappointing in terms of the plateauing, there are pockets of good examples, particularly in terms of some of the BCP investments that we've made, which have shown genuine growth. And to members' points, where we have high frequency, good quality services, where you almost don't need a timetable because it's almost a turn up and go service, we can see good growth on those routes. And I think, again, that's a demonstration of the kinds of services that people want and expect, but also the ones that do generate additional demand.
We want reliable buses. So should we go to then Transdev, everyone to speak to Paul?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just going to pick up a couple of those points. I think the student issue, I think we might be slightly confusing ticket sales with trips here, because there is a bespoke season ticket for 19 to 26-year-old and students that has become less popular because of the Mayor's Fare scheme making the ability just to buy a regular fare more affordable relatively than it used to be. So that used to be our way of giving a discount to 19 to 26-year-olds and students. So I think I do, certainly the data we've seen and the evidence that Combined Authority have done in its survey suggests we aren't doing something drastically wrong in that beef. It's just a different way of tracking the numbers on there. And I think in terms of the bus patronage trends, we have during 2024 in particular been faced with quite a few challenges. Bradford has been quite significantly down in terms of bus patronage with the interchange shut and with massive regeneration in the heart of the city. We know from engaging with the Bradford bid that actually footfall in the city is down in line with that, and that will be felt in a West Yorkshire figure. Even if everybody else stays the same and one is down, it will pull the whole figure down. Halifax town centre is under massive disruption at the moment, it's extremely difficult to reliably run buses in and out of Halifax at the moment, and that undoubtedly leads to a reduction in use. We did see that at times in Leeds when Leeds was going through its big regeneration of the city centre. So there are sometimes structural things that do that actually, as Tim's alluded to, there's actually quite a lot of good stuff going on where services have been improved. Certainly things we've done in on the Keighley-Leeds corridor, the Keighley local network, where First have done similar in some of their service enhancements. But occasionally, yeah, you do end up, it's entirely the right thing for Bradford to do, but you have to have a little bit of pain while that level of regeneration goes on, and it hits everything, not just transport on there. And
Paul,
yeah.
what is your golden ticket for what we should all be doing to increase patronage?
Well, I think it's more of the same, really. It's making sure we deliver frequent, reliable services in the right area. Actually, a lot of the things that have been done with the Halifax Huddersfield corridor, Leeds Bradford corridor, Keighley area services have delivered good growth, and we've shared data with you, and to help build that up. And yeah, the customers simply respond to frequency and reliability. It's not, unfortunately, solely in any organisation's gift to manage that reliability, isn't it? And there are, as I say, there are things that happen that will give you short-term pain, but hopefully we'll be in a position now, with certainly in Bradford with the interchange open City of Culture, that we should see some growth and some stability, and we can start to build on that. And we all need just to work together to make sure that actually people go back into town, because we are, bus patronage is a subset of a vibrant economy, isn't it? And if people are going to visit a town or a city centre, then a proportion of them will travel by bus, and the more people that go, the more people therefore will use public transport. It's working together to try and get that. And there's some good things happening around events around the City of Culture as well, in terms of getting buses on there.
Lovely, thank you. Kim?
Yeah, I think Tim's hit the nail on the head. What drives patronage is fast, frequent, reliable buses. That is where you will see your growth. We spend a lot of time focusing on evenings, early mornings, weekends. Actually, if we focused on the core corridors, that is where we could generate the most growth with the least amount of resources. But just in answer to the question that was asked earlier about what could the councils do to help us with this, I'm not sure that everybody uses weighted averages when they're looking at how infrastructure projects affect the speed of vehicles on a route. And quite often I see that transport planners might look at an average speed across the entire day. Well, we know from our bus networks that we have to put more resource in the peaks, and actually what may seem on an average basis a small delay can have quite big consequences on the peak journeys. A bus can carry 10 times or more what a car can carry, yet when in the modelling I often see that a bus is just considered the same as a car. So if it was weighted towards the number of people that buses carry, I think it would be more efficient and more effective.
Thank you, Kim. Kaylee?
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to touch on the patronage piece in terms of the downturn or the flatlining that's referenced in the report. So just from First West Yorkshire side, I'm pleased to report that actually we're not seeing downturn in our numbers, except in the Bradford district, which we've discussed at length with Bradford councillors, with the Combined Authority and with Councillor Hinchcliffe. And we hope to see that turn around now that the interchange is back open and the pedestrianisation works are coming to their close. So in all other districts we have seen either a flat or a positive year-on-year performance. And what's really pleasing to see is that concessionary trips are up substantially in some of those districts, up as high as 7 or 8% year-on-year in some of the districts. So really positive actually in terms of looking at sort of the travel across our concessionary audience, and as I say, across the sort of what we would say are our adult, child, student demographics, it's more of a sort of flat performance or just slightly positive beyond the Bradford district. And that's even with, for example, in Huddersfield, us passing a substantial chunk of journeys across to the Greater Manchester operation upon their start of franchising for those journeys, which was in March this year. So that's even considering having passed those journeys across. So I don't think that the reporting on patronage, downturn or flatlining is applicable to either all operators or routes or demographics. And I think we just, actually the devil's always in the detail, and it's important to say that there's pockets of growth that's actually I find extremely reassuring. And what we would love to see this year is for Bradford to come back, because Bradford was doing extremely well before. So the golden question then, in terms of how we can work more closely together in partnership on increasing patronage further, I think it's in what I call the 2 Ps, bus priority and bus positivity. One of them's a little bit harder to achieve than the other. One of them requires investment on a pretty substantial basis. But as an operator, what I hear time and time again is negativity towards bus, and unfortunately that does come from voices of authority, and we need to be really careful about how we as voices of authority use our voices when we're talking to people. So I think it's about receiving the feedback and looking forward to say, what can we do about that and how can we work on that, rather than playing that back to the market and playing that back to the media. And my ask would be that we try and reframe the position of bus, because ultimately, to Councillor Buckley's point, when franchising comes, otherwise we have got potentially more of a challenge in the case that there is decline. So bus positivity and bus priority would be, I think, the 2 golden tickets to ensuring that patronage continues to go upwards rather than downwards. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. And Councillor Cotton, do you want to come back really briefly on that?
Yeah, so in terms of bus priority then, what would you suggest in that? So I understand about the positivity, let's talk buses up. It's like I like to use investment rather than subsidy. Let's be sort of really positive about these things. So, but in terms of priority, is there anything specific? What do you mean by that then?
I think there's, we as First would be open to much more deeper conversations around how we can work to provide data on corridors that we find to be challenging to operate buses on a continuous basis. I think it stretches beyond sort of temporary disruption in terms of roadworks, but it's actually around where are the pinch points on a continuous basis despite roadworks. How can bus priority be looked after? We've got years worth of data on this stuff, and we would really welcome some deeper conversations on how money can be spent were it to be made available. So our teams have that information, and yeah, that is what I would say would be a first strong step. Councillor Courtney, thank you.
Andrew, do you want to talk on behalf of sort of smaller operators? What is your golden ticket?
This is an industry position, I say, and fairly consistent with my larger members here. It's bus journey speeds, and we have so much data on this. I'm not going to look at Simon at this point, but our chief executive presented to one of the many North Transport conferences that was in Manchester a couple of years ago, and you could see the average bus journey speeds, it declined so much over the last 20 or 30 years, and in many cases you can make a direct correlation between bus journey speeds and patronage. And I think I've talked to the committee before about the virtuous circle. It's very simple. The more efficient you can make buses is making them faster. They then become visibly more attractive to the public. They then become reliable. And there's many, many different ways you can do that, through building extra roads, moving curbs. But ultimately, the 2 cheapest things, not necessarily the easiest, is paint and policy. That is the cheapest by far. But in terms of data, as Kayleigh said, local operators have significant amounts of data to support the argument. We, as the trade body, have lots of data. Most of the operators throughout the country provide survey results to us each year, and it goes into something called the CPT cost index, which is very well respected. An industry economist called Chris Cheek works on that. Many local authorities actually work on that and factor that into their contract pricing. And also, I think since the last time I was here, CPT have released economic reports on both bus and coach with lots of data, so I'm happy to share that with the committee. But ultimately, bus journey speeds will be the #1 thing for me. Speed up buses, so much to be achieved from it.
And by that you don't mean very fast speeds, do you? You mean actually be able to get through, to be able to get to A to B in a reasonable fashion, just to qualify what you were saying there. I'm just going to follow my list now. So I've got Councillor Moses Crook, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Pinnock, and Councillor Caroline Firth this time, and then Councillor Joe.
Thanks very much, Chair. I'm going to repeat what Councillor Firth said earlier about how positive it is that work's going to be starting on Dewsbury Bus Station in March, but also that there's positive work underway already on the Heckman Dwight Bus Station. And I just wanted to note that Kirklees are managing this project, but we're very keen that the West Yorkshire Combined Authority, the Transport Authority, take over that bus station as soon as it's completed. I think currently as it stands, for whatever historical reasons, I think there were issues around revenue constraints at the point when capital funding was awarded. It would be run by Kirklees and not by the Transport Authority, which I think would be inconsistent. Almost unique in the Combined Authority, but I think there's risk here that it could lead to inconsistency on customer experience over time in the network. So it wouldn't start off that way because obviously we're aligned design with the Combined Authority. But I just want some assurance really on that transfer, but also probably quite when we get that assurance officially through the officer channel, so we can stop making plans to try and run it through our corporate landlord function and so on. Thanks.
Thanks. I'll just take Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of comments and then a question from me. I still can't get over our buses aren't reliable, but they are punctual. That's gonna stay with me, that one. But can I thank the officers and everybody at the Combined Authority for the work they've done to try and mitigate, particularly the school buses, because that's been a massive job of work and a very successful job of work. So thank you. It doesn't go unnoticed or unappreciated. Likewise with the passenger charter, the inclusion of accessibility as a key performance indicator. That's a change in response to something raised at committee. So thank you for listening and thank you for including that, because I think it's a very worthy addition. But my question is on the M card, on the ticketing. It says in the report that there was a recent campaign to try and increase use of M card and the app, but then it says that downloads of the app were actually down on last year, but it doesn't say by how much. How much were the downloads down by, and what's our theory as to why that might have been after a publicity campaign?
Okay, and then I've got Councillor Pinnock.
I do apologise. Many years ago, when I first started working in Leeds, Arriva put on a bus that went on the M62. And gradually over time, it took longer and longer to get into Leeds. I'm answering this point about journey speeds, journey times. Until in the end, it just wasn't worth running the bus on the motorway. So they went back to running them on Whitehall Road instead. And there is another point, and that is motorway junctions. We have a particularly nasty one in our ward at Chain Bar. That's junction 26 on the M62. And the bus route is on the only arm of that road that does not have traffic lights, and so therefore the delays on that service are at some times a day really quite considerable. I'm sorry, this is a negative point, unfortunately, but that's one of these things. In order to do all the things we want to do, that needs to be sorted out. And most of the junctions on the M62 have got problems that are similar, not exactly the same, but they cause a bottleneck of one sort or another. The only thing it seems to me to deal with those is bus priority round those junctions. It all costs money, inevitably. Whose money, I'm not quite sure. The Highways England don't seem very keen on spending money on things like that. So I don't quite know where you get it from. But that seems to me is the sort of thing that you have got to do.
Thank you. So let's just answer those first of all. Councillor Crook's question about the bus station.
Thank you. So my understanding is that historically the issue around Heckman White bus station has been that it's actually classified as highway, and that's the reason why it ended up being within the local authority. Nonetheless, Absolutely, councillor. We want to make it part of the network of West Yorkshire bus stations. We are already working in partnership with council colleagues in terms of the project management of the scheme, and I know there's a process underway between officers to plot out the transfer. So it is definitely happening. Happy for that to be minuted.
And I don't know if you or as Tim wanted to answer a question about the M card.
I don't have the precise number in terms of reduction to hand. I can go away and get those numbers and share them after the event. I would expect that because we have reached a plateau of sorts in terms of the number of people who are likely to want to use the app. So app growth when initially launched was significant, and an uptake of M card as a range of products was also significant, particularly when the barcode feature was added. So I suspect we're probably just seeing a plateauing of likely users as opposed to a reduction in demand. But we can provide some more details outside of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pinnock, you sort of answered your own question about bus corridors. So CRSTS is something that I know we've been using across the region to put on some of those what I called bus hotspot bits. Some first bus bits is what I call them in Bradford, but I'm sure the other names them elsewhere in the other local authority areas. So that is still a route. If there are things that are identified that are going to speed up bus journey times, we should all consider in our local authorities and speak to combined authority about prioritising those schemes, shouldn't we really? Did you want to come in that, Simon?
Absolutely, Chair, and we've got an item later on the agenda on the preparation of the new local transport plan. It is very much our intention that we're advising as strongly as we possibly can that bus priority and the support of the bus product needs to be an absolute priority for the local transport plan. To answer your question before, and the reason why you got a series of different answers, is we've got to lift the whole product in order to attract new demand back to bus travel. So there is undoubtedly more that we can do in terms of journey times. There are a significant number of routes in West Yorkshire where frequency is very low, and that is making it difficult for people in busy lives to choose to switch from car to bus. And of course the other challenge that we face is that, whilst Kim quite rightly highlights that if the only thing you were doing was pursuing the next person to get out of their car and get onto a bus, then we would spend all of our money on as many services on main routes as we can. But of course you've got a wider duty as a combined authority to think about how you provide bus services that support all parts of the conurbation. So it is not a straightforward task that you've been asked to do with limited resources to promote a bus network that can meet the needs of everybody and be as attractive as possible to everybody. And fundamentally, it comes down to money and how we can best manage the money to that end.
I think what you have on this committee is a group of people who understand the main issues about patronage and want to make that happen, and we'll gradually do that with the money we're allowed, what we can just prioritise within our own districts. We've got Councillor Caroline first, Councillor Jones, Councillor McGrath, and then Councillor Cowell.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up Bradford Interchange and say thank you for all the hard work of officers and others involved, and Bradford Council staff in getting it reopened. We're obviously very pleased it's reopened. I want to thank bus users for being patient as well. Just wanted to flag that there are still some repairs to do. Thank you for fixing the lift, that was appreciated. But yeah, this is particularly the leaky roof, and we'd like some more information on that and just reassurance that it's been progressed at pace, particularly when we're going to have so many visitors this year who are using that as their entrance to the city, and we're wanting to put more art there as well.
Thank you. And then Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. At the start of this asked a meeting about after 7 o'clock how people are contacted. None of the 3 private operators in the room have answered that question. So I would like some explanation as to what people do from the 3 operators. or private operators, I'm very clear it's not public service, by the way. So nobody's answered that question, so it'd be nice if somebody actually tried to answer a question that's been asked.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor McGrath.
Thank you very much. It's just a question regarding technology, really. So, obviously, nobody said the golden ticket to better use of the buses, patronage, is upping the charge by 50%. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think it's very reasonable, and I would get the bus for that and think that's cheaper than what I paid before. So I've got no issue with that. But in a time where we're comparing our stats to pre-COVID levels and we're trying to get people back on the buses, in that same time, Uber has stepped the game up in travel. And I can go on and I can see who my driver is, where he is, how much it's going to cost me, well in advance. Now, I do have sympathy with Councillor Raymond Jones regarding people who don't have smartphones, but we are moving into a world very quickly where technology is, your work needs it. You get taught it at school, and you'll probably have a smartphone before you leave school. So my question is, do you think we're keeping up with the private? So if we are going to franchise, which I believe we are, we were looking for reasons why people would use a bus over an Uber. Sorry for using a specific place, but I'm going to Uber myself because I know I can see where it is, I can see what it is, I can see everything about it. I've just gone on to your next bus, and I'm still not sure what's going on. I've got lots of dots. I don't know whether it's live data. I don't know where my bus actually is. I don't know how long it's actually going to be. Whether that factors in a temporary traffic stop halfway along. Uber does, and it will tell me. So I'm wondering whether we think we're doing enough to keep up with the competition.
Thank you, Councillor McGrath. And Councillor Cardle?
Thank you. I was just going to come in with a bit of a comment before maybe the operators come back on some. I will just pick up that point about cost. We're not increasing. I think you mentioned a cost of 50% increase. That would be the fare outside of West Yorkshire. Ours will retain at £2 until March, and then go up by 50 pence to £2.50, not 50% outside. So, but yeah, we're conscious. I mean, one of the reasons of that is to have some money to pay for continuing the services as they are as well. So we have had to make a balance there. One bit I did want to point out down at 3.11 in the report, just updates on a new method of reporting punctuality that we'll bring in. Members will see it at the next meeting actually, but then we'll have that next time the operators come, which hopes to have a bit more of a better conversation. It shows the 5 best performing and the 5 most challenging services across the district. So hopefully the aim being to increase that conversation we can have about more constructively what are the real reasons why these particular services are struggling. Is it to do with a variety of issues? What can we do to solve it? And I think that'll be something that will come to a better conversation. Around that point around increasing patronage, I think quite a lot of it we have seen where we've been able to. So Simon raised the LTP report that comes up later, and people told us quite clearly that in the vision and that what they wanted was the reliability of services and the frequency of services to be increased. When we did that work in Leeds for the transport strategy, the doubling of bus patronage that we put on Leeds is the people that are in cars that said they'd use the bus if it was faster and more reliable. So that comes to that journey time point as well. So we kind of know what we're going to do, but on that investment in the Keighley corridor between BSIP and Transdev, having a service every 20 minutes at peak, that's gone up 30% in patronage to match that, and that's because somebody can turn up to the bus stop not caring what time the bus is and know that they'll only have to wait 15-20 minutes maximum. And the same on the A647 Leeds to Bradford corridor where we put bus reliability measures in and a bus corridor along there. That's gone up by 30% increase, and first increased the services to every 7 minutes along that corridor at the same time. So if we work together and do all of it, we can get that increase, but it does rely on every bit of the picture coming together. And I think that's the difficult bit when you're working through it, not in a symptomatic way, and hopefully through franchising, that'll be easier for us to do because we'll be making all those decisions, and it'll be slightly easier for ourselves, I think, to see how that all fits together on a map and on a piece. But hopefully that better reporting of punctuality of services will help, because we'll be able to identify some more of those key issues.
Thank you. Gentlemen, answer the question about interchange. Councillor Firth.
So thank you, Councillor Firth. Yes, absolutely committed to completing the works. Obviously, we are finishing the works on the upper deck, making sure it's safe for use and fit for purpose. But that is linked to the leakage as well, so making sure that we fix that as part of that, and then that can be a problem of the past, and the wider refurbishment work as well, as you rightly know. So we are continuing the work at pace with priority, and there's a lot of effort from the teams in the Combined Authority with support from yourself and councillors to get that work completed.
Thank you. And then I think Ariva did answer your question, Councillor Jones. It was the other operators who probably didn't. So first, do you want to answer the question about?
Yeah, no problem. So from our side, you're right, Councillor Jones, that the contact centre isn't open at that point in the evening. I don't know whether other operator contact centres are open at that point in the evening, but what's clear within the West Yorkshire Passenger Charter is that irrespective of the time of the day, customers should keep their receipt. And so it specifically says if your last bus doesn't arrive within 20 minutes, you can call a taxi, save the receipt and claim that back. That claim back would never happen that night, irrespective of whether the contact centre was open. It's not a same day process, Councillor Jones. So, but what we do ask is that people do follow that process, because absolutely they deserve to be able to get that money back in the case that the unfortunate circumstances that they've had to follow the process to get a taxi and get them home. Maybe there is the point of making that information more prevalent at bus stops, which I think Tim's already addressed. Thanks.
So that wasn't meant to be a gong. I don't know why I did this.
I thought you were timing me out, Councillor.
Paul, do you want to come in on that question of Councillor Jones?
Yeah, I mean, similar response to Kaylee, really. There's no need to contact instantly at that time in order to get that phone. And I think the taxi guarantee has been in place for 7 or 8 years now. It's not a particularly new thing. And I think, Chair, you made the comment about, do we need to track the numbers of refunds that we're giving to show the success of the scheme? The numbers are low because it is there as a belt and braces, because we tried our very best to avoid cancelling the last bus. It's not something as an industry we do as a habit. It's something that, if it happens in our business, it's a report to the board to understand why it's happened, taken as seriously as we would do a MOT film, because we know that the consequences of doing that. Certainly in the last recent months, I'm aware of one that we've issued, and that was actually the bus did run, but had to divert away from Vicar Lane because the road was closed. But it was an emergency closure, and nobody had told the people waiting at the bus stop it wasn't coming. So we treated it as if it was cancelled and refunded that taxi on there. But that's the only one in recent times that we've needed to do. So this is very much a belt and braces process. The actual reason to stop the problem is not to cancel that last service and leave people stranded. If in the unfortunate event that it happens, then that's the recompense we'll do to make sure people get home.
Thank you. And Andrew, from Smaller Operator.
Just a more general point, I would agree with Paul. All operators that I know that I represent, the Holy Grail is absolutely you run the last service. And yeah, there may be instances where that's been a challenge, as was in that case, Councillor. Obviously, I don't know the detail of that. What I would also say is West Yorkshire is ahead of most areas on this. So I sit in too many enhanced partnerships, probably about a dozen, and West Yorkshire's absolutely led the way for several years now on this. So there is an achievement there that everybody should be proud of. Doesn't mean to say that we can always strive to be better, of course, absolutely, but we'll start from a really good base here.
Okay, thank you. And can I just ask Tim perhaps to answer the Uber question, which Councillor McGrath put so eloquently?
Of course, Chair. I think for me, any disruptive technology like that can make people look at the way that they provide their services and information differently. For me, actually, this is actually quite a simple requirement, though. What passengers really want is access transparently across many channels for consistent, easy to access, easy to understand information. Whether that is on a piece of paper, whether that is on a digital display at a bus stop, on an app or over the phone, as long as you get the same information in a timely and easy to understand manner, actually then I think we've made that requirement. But there is always a role for technology to push that expectation forward, and particularly around the timeliness of that information is key. So thank you, Chair, but happy to discuss further details if required.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we need to sort of move on to the next item. We've got rail operators waiting patiently, and we've got a few items on the agenda. So unless there's any burning questions from the committee, is there anybody else who's not feel they've answered a question? No? Okay. I will move on to the rail, which is where we need to do the relay run, actually. So if the rail operators can come with their name tag, you take your name tags away with you, and the rail operators bring their name tags with them. Thank you very much. So, shall we start on presenting this paper? Who's presenting on this? Dave Haskins.
Okay, in the same way as Tim provided a brief overview of the bus paper, I'll try and give a couple of minute brief overview of the rail paper, and then we can, some of those issues that I'm flagging will be issues that the rail operators may want to pick up themselves. Firstly, on patronage, Northern reporting patronage up 3%. This was in the autumn year on year. But as we will come on to later in the paper, they are facing some significant challenges at the moment on service delivery, and we'll be able to talk about that in some more detail. TPE, meanwhile, have high levels of patronage growth, up about 12%. They've seen quite a number of reductions in cancellations and a stabilisation of performance. Of course, you'll recall the last 12 months there have been a reduction in services in order to achieve that stabilisation. And again, we can hear some about how that has paid off. A lot of that growth has been driven by leisure travel growth, though it is noted that overall the proportion of commuting travel on TPE is down to about 19% now, and it was about 27% pre-COVID. In terms of LNER, they're reporting around 15% higher patronage. There's some large leisure market growth there and strong Leeds to London growth, although the Bradford opportunities will be growing as more services come on stream during the year. Finally, on the patronage side, the Office of Rail Regulator published some statistics in November on rail station usage. This shows, if you average the above, you've got about 5% increase in West Yorkshire in patronage. The figures are still down on 2019. That's about 57 million against what was 72 million. But these are still higher than about 10 years ago, and there's a strong upward trend. Leeds Station itself has shown an increase of 3.9%. While this is good growth, this is lagged behind some growth in other major cities, such as Manchester and Sheffield, which are up 9–10%. So that's an area we need to look into to understand what's driving that low, or what's not driving the growth, should we say, compared to other cities. In terms of network changes, some positive news around Leeds to Doncaster, as well as the sort of Leeds, Bradford, Ilkley, Skipton services, which will be returning to 4-car services in May. There's also some lengthening of trains on Skipton and Ilkley lines to 6-car coming up. And we have been working with Rail North Partnership around reversing some of the proposed Sunday service cuts on the York, Pontefract, Bag Hill, Rotherham, Sheffield routes. We've got some agreement in principle to return those to 2 trains per hour from May. There's still some work to go through there. The report provides an update on East Coast Mainline service changes for the end of this year, although the Combined Authority are still pressing for safeguards in place around the resolution of some performance issues with services there as well. We're also still in discussions with the rail industry around the Bradford to Ilkley Skipton services to get them back to 2 trains per hour, and an evidence-backed plan is under development there. And finally, on that area, we've got the Bradford Forster Square platform, which is on schedule for May 25. I understand that will take the number of direct London services up to 7 trains per day, which is really good news for Bradford, particularly in the year of culture. Moving on to performance, there are some industry-wide challenges that they have not shirked from as a rail industry, particularly around rest day working agreements, sickness levels, and a number of network rail delays. Plus, they have been dealing with addressing the training backlogs, which was causing issues historically. So the operators are here and will be able to cover issues around performance, particularly including what the proposals are to deal with this. Northern themselves have had particular issues with higher cancellations. As mentioned, rest day working has been central to resolving this. They've also developed a remedial plan to address the long-term issues and aiming to get up to that performance of 90% on time. They're currently at 75%, and 2% cancellations, which are currently at 7% overall. But I say only, but they are at 3.4% in the eastern region. It's the west of their patch, which has taken the brunt of the problems there. There are three phases to Northern, which is stabilising, resetting and performance. And a more detailed remediation plan has been requested by ourselves to include milestones, progress tracking and regular reporting. My understanding is Transpennine Express have rest day working in place till March, and they've restored full services following the plan, as I've discussed, that was over the previous 12 months. But more widely, there's been an increase in faults attributable to Network Rail, and that has been impacting on performance. A letter was issued to the Network Rail Eastern region expressing concerns around this, to which they have responded, providing us with some assurances, although there's a plan which still needs to be worked through around what exactly that means in getting that back on track. The final section I'll just briefly touch on is the passenger network enhancements. It's fair to say the big focus this year in our area is around Transpennine route upgrade. There was a blockade that took place in autumn on the Leeds to Dewsbury Huddersfield section, which went to plan, and they have a series of user groups that they report in when there are challenges, and there hasn't been any real negative feedback in relation to any of the work that's taken place so far. The next biggie really is the Huddersfield blockade from the 30th of August to 29th of September, when Huddersfield Station will be closed. There's been some very strong engagement with the Transpennine route upgrade team, it's fair to say, and there's a plan in place to use Brighouse Station to provide the best possible service to passengers in the circumstances, including a bus service to Huddersfield. And it's probably worth mentioning that the bus replacement services is a significant issue that we need to focus on and to make sure that that's done well. I think it'd be worth us thinking about getting, if we can, Transpennine route upgrade team maybe into the next Transport Committee to give us a bit of an overview of the work that's going on and to raise and highlight what kind of disruption is likely to take place and the measures that are being measures that will be put in place to make sure that goes as smoothly as possible. My final point is there's an update provided on the Department for Transport's Access for All programme, including the status of schemes at Garforth, Menston, Todmorden and Pontefract Monkhill. Variable levels of progress across those schemes, because Northern are facing some delivery challenges which we are currently working through with them. And we've also got a wider scheme on accessibility at Guiseley Station, which isn't mentioned in the report, which is also being progressed. And I'll pass back to the Chair from that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know something I'm sure Councillor Firth will welcome for TPU to come to this committee and just to give an give an update on the upgrade, because obviously it's a significant amount of investment happening in our area. It is going to be disruptive. However, it is going to lead to wider regeneration benefits in the years to come. So let's make sure that's on the agenda. So just to introduce Darren and George, you want to introduce yourselves?
Good afternoon all, I'm Darren Alsop, I'm the Stakeholder Manager for the East Region at Northern.
Hi, and I'm George Thomas, I'm TP Strategic Development and Stakeholder Director.
So thank you very much for coming here today. Obviously in the report we have some of the LNER and Grand Central in there as well, but any questions for Northern and TPS have been kind enough to come here today. Councillor Courtney.
Thank you. I think as described in paragraph in 3.1, rail patronage is up 3% for period 8 compared to the previous year, so it's 24 compared to 23. And settling of industrial disputes may well have assisted this, so that's really good. Off-peak leisure travel is a particular growth point for Northern Rail on the Calder Valley line, which is fantastic for us. So sort of represent Hebden Bridge sort of area, but you know, as transport leader for the whole of Calderdale. But I do have an interest in the Upper Valley and the Calder Valley line specifically. Weekend footfall at Leeds Station in September reached 97% of pre-pandemic levels, which is brilliant. It's really going in the right direction. Unfortunately, Northern Rail, you've had some reliability issues. I'd like to say major reliability issues. That feels a bit harsh, but they are quite big. And in fact, Rail North expressed concerns. You know, on the Northern mitigation, on your mitigation programme. So my question is, how are you as Northern Rail intending to overcome your reliability problems to really build long-term growth? Another $1 million question.
Thank you. I'll just go to Councillor, I can't read my own writing, Wallace. So Councillor Wallace, Councillor Morley, and then Councillor Kimber, and then we'll go to your break.
Thank you, Chair. It's just to say, first of all, thank you for the improvements in the rail service for Wakefield and Castleford between Manchester and York, which is increased. I've had a lot of positive reports, especially about people going to York. I think the expectation, we did say when the service was coming up that it should be well used, and I think it is. I just would like the service to go to Scarborough, but I realise even now the service doesn't move, even now from Leeds to Scarborough. I think you now have to change at York. But that's just, but in the main, it's been a good thing. We have had the different groups at Castleford, especially the Civic Society, who have set up a Friends of the Castleford Railway Station under Northern's guidance, which is appreciated, and they're looking at things like planters and that at the station, working with Northern on that. So that is positive. That's come from the improved services. So that's come from that. The only concern that has been raised over time is the car park at the station, which I think is run by Northern. It's not a car park where there are cash machines, and I think there has been a misunderstanding as to whether it's free on Sunday or not. I do gather it's not, whereas most car parks in the town are. But it's mainly about this no cash machines, and also about the signage at the station. And then the other one, which Councillor Morley and myself have been contacted by the group, is about the naming of trains, and we just can't find a procedure for it. I don't know if I'm sure Councillor Morley will have more to say about that, because he's been involved more than I thought he'd been. But there's been a request. There's been no. We can't find any clear way of how that's done. And we just wondered if you could advise us on that. Thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Morley, would you like to? You were indicated on my list anyway.
Yeah, thank you for that. Just a couple of points, really, some thank yous and just an observation. Firstly, it's good to see that the Leeds to Doncaster service, the 4 trains were returned sooner rather than later on that. That's something that's been a massive positive for the area of Wakefield. And also the Yorkshire Sheffield service, that'll be returning in May as well, that serves Baghill. So thank you very much for that. When it comes to Northern as well, though, there's some, for passenger numbers, we have some statistics there for Leeds, but there's nothing there for outside of Leeds. So you're just interested to know what the figures are for the Wakefield district, and I'm sure elsewhere as well. And when it comes to the last one, though, the access for all, obviously Pontefract Station's on there. The last time I asked this at the last Transport Committee, we was told that audience will be up and work will be started as we speak. I don't believe either of us happened, and there may be pressures there, but everywhere's got pressures at the moment. That funding was put in place in early 2020. We're now in 2025. It'd be interesting to know, will I be getting a train pass or a bus pass before it gets up and running, sort of thing? It is going on and on and on and on for that one, and I'm sure anyone could answer. It would be nice if rail companies, though, we are looking to name a train. We have a grateful rugby league legend. The Council Civic Society will welcome any dialogue with yourselves about how we could do that. We're happy to have a discussion with Northern after this meeting, if that's possible, and set a way forward. Thank you for that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Morley. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you. I have a few things, if I may. I'm going to be really, really quick, very brief. So around the access for all, Todmorden Station, we're still awaiting the restart and completion dates on that. We're awaiting those. Then a couple of questions around community rail partnership. So we know that Manchester have joined, and why are we not having Leeds and Bradford joining into that partnership? With the amazing community work that they do, the Friends of, there are statutory consultee on the timetable, as well. And then my final one is around Madden Road train station. We've got, I've brought this up before, we've got a ginormous car park and not very many trains stopping. We've got a petition at the moment which is getting quite a lot of interest because people would like to easily park there rather than go to Hebden Bridge. Also have a bridge where the car parks are small and be able to get on any train that goes through that Calder Valley line and get off at Madden Road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, can I go to Northern first for responses? There's quite a lot of those for you, actually.
Quite a lot for us. Thank you. Where to start? So I think the first question was regarding the Calder Valley. Oh, would you like me to continue? Thank you, Chair. So the Calder Valley service provision hasn't been good enough. We recognise that, and just a statistic which I don't like to share really, but the Blackpool to York service cancellation number was 12.3% in period 9. So when we talk about, you know, the overall around about 3% for the east, we realise we're letting customers down. I think we've been very open and honest about that. That's not good enough. From a Calder Valley point of view, the leisure provision and the customer numbers have been really, really good, and we are working hard, as I think Dave has said within his overview. We're working hard to try to rectify this. We have had some challenges with the industrial position, as has been widely publicised. Thankfully, we're over that now. We have a driver rest day working agreement until 2027, which driver cancellations have really reduced since we've got this agreement in place, which is fantastic. What we are seeing, and again, there's a real challenge, mainly on a Sunday, for conductor availability. And we are seeing double the amount of cancellations for Sundays, which obviously when people wish to travel for leisure, that's not good. And again, something that we're trying to address. What really needs to happen, the railways need to have a 7-day terms and conditions across all of our colleagues. We did have a referendum to the conductors for Western Central to see if we could get a deal for working Sundays, and unfortunately that referendum was rejected. And again, so we're working really, really hard to try and look at how we can progress with a 7-day railway. Again, as Dave has alluded to, we are working with Rail North Partnership on an improvement plan. That improvement plan is still being worked through with some additional questions from Rail North Partnership and the committee. That will see an improvement from Northern. And I think what's really important to understand is that we do not think we are in a good place. We want to be better. I think it's really important to acknowledge that we are letting some of our customers down. The leisure travel is brilliant, and we're really pleased with that. We are seeing a return to some of the commute, and again, some of those figures are encouraging. I hope that answers the question on the Calder Valley. It's not good enough. We'd like it to be better. It will be better, but we do have some real significant challenges with that. Just on the Castleford, thank you for the positive, and I think George, some of those positives come to TP for some of that service provision and uplift. I'll leave George to talk about the Scarborough provision there. Just from the Castleford parking point of view, most car parks are going to items like Ringo with the app. You can call and you can ring the number to get your parking. We appreciate that not everybody has mobile technology and not everybody can use that. However, in the main, we don't see significant problems. There is a telephone number to ring. That is the way forward for Northern. We're not going to reintroduce cash at our stations, which we do charge for, but we will try and work with all communities to help and assist in getting that understanding of which telephone numbers you need to call, how you get that assistance if you require. Train naming. We tend not to name trains because we would get so many different requests for naming trains. However, if something specific, I'm happy to have an offline conversation. I'm not sure of the person or what that naming may be, but it could be something that we could do, but we try not to encourage that because of so many different requests that you can imagine that we would probably receive. Glad about the Leeds to Doncaster 4-car. The early morning Doncaster, that was the 3-car, has been one of our busiest trains, and we are leaving people behind. So we're happy to see that reintroduction of a 4-car from the next timetable. Figures for Wakefield, the Officer Rail and Road published figures, so they're available online. Again, I can circulate those if that's required. Happy to do so, and that will give each station, you can filter that, you can get each station's footfall figures easily on that. I'm coming near to the end. Pontefract access for all, and I think I'll address the Todmorden access for all scheme at the same time, if that's okay. We had a contract with a group. Those contracts have been ended. Todmorden has been delayed. It's partway through the construction. We're just currently out to tender for a new contractor. Pontefract access for all is also delayed further because the same contractor that we've now ended our deal with were the contractors for Pontefract. And again, I've committed to Yvette Cooper, who is the MP for Pontefract, to give it an update. And again, I'm happy to do so. There are no current updates on the timeline for Pontefract because, as I say, we're entering into new contracts for Todmorden and for Pontefract Monkhill. But I'm happy to provide a written update as to the estimated completion and timelines for both of those schemes.
We have to start asking questions and answering them quickly. So, Councillor Morley, just briefly come back.
Very briefly, very shocked by that answer. Access for all, the council, Wakefield Council, put in over £1 million. It wasn't match funding, it was more money than actually that Wakefield Council. And to give us no update whatsoever actually is not acceptable. No respect to Yvette Cooper, I'm glad you're updating her, but it's Wakefield Council that's put the funding in place. So I would expect a greater dialogue between yourselves and Wakefield Council going forward in future. That's not acceptable.
Thank you, and let's make sure that Councillor Morley then gets a briefing with Wyker and Northern on that. Absolutely right. There's some Councillor Kimber mentioned the community rail partnership. Any answers on that?
Nothing immediate other than I've been picking up with rail operators around community rail partnerships. I met a couple of them last week to talk through that. I was at the Northern's conference in York a week ago. We're going to start entering into a bit more dialogue around what we can do there. So watch the space.
And George, would like to come in from a TP point.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I just want to say a few words about rail patronage that was mentioned in a couple of places and in Dave's update. So year on year, TP have seen a 16% increase in our numbers. So that's since the timetable was introduced just at the beginning of December. So that puts us at the top of the league for growth across UK rail, which is really positive. I think just wanted to provide a bit of reassurance, because obviously that starts to give rise to some concerns that we might run out of seats. I think you'll have heard us say previously that we introduced 1,300 extra seats each day at the timetable change back in December. So I think the good news to try and share is that despite the fact that we've seen that increase in patronage, we have actually seen a reduction in the number of trains that are fully loaded. So we're running at around 5% at the moment of services that are running with a few people standing. So that's sort of positive progress so far. Just to pick up on the points around Wakefield, so that's been a real success story for us. I've been quite astonished really by the amount of growth that we've seen. So over the course of last year, we saw a tenfold increase in the number of customers travelling on those services. It was a real success story. Obviously now that's hourly. We hope to see that continue. The point around Scarborough, I hope I've understood that correctly. So if we go back to the timetable that we put in place back last December. That sees the Manchester Scarborough service reintroduced. So hopefully that will be addressing that concern there. Obviously, that had previously just been a shuttle service between York and Scarborough for the duration of 2024. So hopefully that addresses that concern there. And if I may, Chair, while I've just got the mic, I just wanted to acknowledge that Dave made the point around the TRU and the disruption that's coming up at Huddersfield. I just want to say thank you to the colleagues at the Combined Authority and at Kirklees for all the help that they've given us to try and get in place those arrangements. I think it is going to be a real challenge. We've got a month throughout September this year where we'll be running without any trains through Huddersfield at all, and then we'll be needing to manage some of the local traffic through an interchange at Brickhouse for the rest of 2025, but also the whole of 2026. So it's a really considerable operation, and I'd certainly second Dave's suggestion that I'm sure colleagues from TRU would be keen to come and give some more detail, and if it's helpful to host people at Huddersfield to have a walk around and see what the plans to rebuild the station look like, then more than happy to facilitate that. I've also brought you lots of reading material which I've put on the table over there. If it's helpful to pick up some of those brochures, that'll explain what's going on TRU more broadly, but particularly at Huddersfield, which is a really key focus for us this year.
Thank you very much. So we'll obviously look at that at the next meeting. I think it'll be really a good opportunity. Also mentioned about Mytham Road. Is that you then, Damien, about more stopping at Mytham Road? And presumably that's a timetabling issue, I would imagine.
And again, I think what's really important is we need to get the service that we promised now correct, and then continue to look at additional services. I think the improvement plan is really important to get to this 90% times 3 and 2% cancellations. So we will work with authorities and local councils, etc., on service specification, but we just have to get what we're promising now, I think, correct, and we have to kind of provide a service to the customers that we advertise. So we will work and we'll continue to work regarding changes to services, and we have added additional stops at various locations on the Calder Valley, which has seen improvements. I know people want to have more, and we will continue to try to do so, but it's really important that we deliver a better, more reliable service than we have been for our customers.
Thank you. Councillor O'Cloughlin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as I can. My first point is a slightly parochial question about the new timetable that TP have put in place in my part of the world, and particularly the loss of direct services to Leeds from Slough and Marsden stations along the Colne Valley line. It's caused a lot of inconvenience in my part of the world, and it's the first time there hasn't been a direct service to Leeds from there in over 40 years. So people have built their lives and bought their homes in anticipation of being able to carry on doing that. So it's not satisfactory, and I would like to see it reinstated at the earliest opportunity, please. On the TRU, the blockade at Huddersfield is going to be a massive disruption, and I welcome what Dave said about engaging with the user groups. Can I just please ask that we make sure we are engaging meaningfully with the user groups, particularly we've got Smart and Shrug, who I think sometimes feel a little bit ignored. And on the report itself, on P-coding in the figures in Appendix 1, I'm sure we used to include P-coding in those figures, but they're not in this report, so please could they be included in future, because it's a sneaky way of getting a few more cancellations under the radar in it.
Okay, are you okay with that? Is that an acquiescence from Dave?
Yeah, we can look at that, yeah, it's no problem.
Lovely. Any further? Eric? Councillor Firth, rather.
Thank you, Chair. We've had a host of questions, and most illuminating are the answers from Darren and George. But one minor point, I think David could help with this. I was at a meeting this morning in Huddersfield, and a number of people raised a point that the passenger replacement buses, particularly on a Sunday, were stacking up in Georgia Square and actually clogging it all up for the Hackney drivers and the normal users of the area. So can we just have a little word? Obviously the buses are needed. Can we stack them up somewhere else, please, rather than St George's Square? Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. We'll take that as an action, I think, probably, that needs resolving. Any other questions of the operators whilst we've got them here? Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. This is probably more for Northern. and it's not relating directly to any report, but it's to do specifically with unmanned stations. There's one in my ward and there's quite a few around the Wakefield district, but when it comes to the bad weather, particularly with the snow we had, which then froze over, we had quite slippery stations, you know, with ice and stuff for quite a long time, and some of these stations are also hard to access with steep slopes or steep steps and things, and a few times I've gone on and off the train at Fitzwilliam and we're nearly sliding on the platform myself, and I just think it's really dangerous when we're, you know, outside obviously live railways which also has high speed sort of London trains going through as well, and I just wondered if there's anything we could do in the future when snow hits at trying to clear the snow before it freezes over and things on these stations to make it safer.
Councillor Williamson, that's an excellent question that I think all of us in West Yorkshire have grappled with over the last few weeks, and actually we could have had a whole session on that as well. Obviously, platforms, we've had people complaining that, you know, it was so icy that it was dangerous, etc., etc. We could do with a longer conversation about it, really, what your cold weather plans are. So is that something you can provide us with, what your cold weather plans are at stations, and briefly just respond on there?
I agree, Chair, that we probably could be here for a lengthy conversation, and I'm happy to do so. You know, I meet with Dave, etc., on a monthly basis, so we could add that to an agenda. It was unprecedented. Of 469 stations, every one of them required attention, and our contract just couldn't cope with the actual need. And we recognise that some of those stations, I mean, I saw my local station, Appley Bridge and Guiseley, they were also in a place where we wouldn't like them to be. And I apologise to customers who were affected at any station, because it was a really, really tricky time. And I think the ice was compounded because you can put grit down over stone that didn't work. We're having an internal conversation regarding whether or not that's fit for purpose and what we need to do with our contractor should this happen again. But it's just say, obviously, it wasn't as good as it could have been. It was unprecedented across the whole of the north. We normally get isolated pockets, so it's much easier to deal with, but there are definitely some lessons to be learned, and I think, you know, that's got to be acknowledged, and I do apologise for that, but happy to have a deeper and more meaningful conversation.
Lovely, thank you very much. So, with that, if people don't mind, we just need to move on now, because we're going to be running out of time. And I've failed enormously in this meeting. I apologise to keep us on track. But these are all very important questions from local communities who are obviously concerned about their passenger transport experience by bus and rail. So thank you very much for your attendance this afternoon. Local transport plan then. Yep, Helen.
Thank you, Councillor Hinchcliffe. I'll try and keep this brief because of time as well. But the paper that was presented in the pack was for two purposes. First of all, just to bring to Transport Committee the fact that in December the devolution white paper was published, and this sets out proposals to strengthen devolution. There will be a longer conversation about this at the Combined Authority next week, but it was just really to kind of raise this with Transport Committee. Within there was a range of proposed powers relevant to transport, moving the Combined Authority, and this Combined Authority is one of them, to become a strategic authority. Was the first thing, creation of an integrated settlement from which West Yorkshire will be part of from March 2026 or April 2026. The relationship and the creation of a local growth plan and making the statutory for us as a combined authority, and publication of local transport plan guidance, and so I'll come on to out where we are in ours in a moment. Also within that, specifically on transport, providing the Mayor with statutory powers on rail and creating and us needing to therefore move forward our engagement with GB Rail to move and develop that as part of West Yorkshire. And then finally on roads, creating a more coordinated approach to the key route network and other areas across that, consistency across a number of areas around requirements in there. So all of this is working forward as a programme now, and the framework provided by government on that. But as I say, more conversation will be at combined authority next week. So then on to the local transport plan, and thank you for some of the comments today, and I appreciate the bus operators have left the room, but we are continuing to work with operators to build the evidence base, and particularly around information on where we have challenges across the bus network, reliability issues, etc., through our local transport plan evidence base. We had a session with members in private of Transport Committee in December, which went well, and through that process, the policy position, the evidence-based position, and where we're going to, if you like, through that, we felt was well received, and we're continuing on the basis of which was presented. We worked through there some of the key areas in the evidence base, but also kind of our targets for where we want to take the local transport plan through, and we'll present more of this in public over the next few months. The main reason for bringing the local transport plan update paper to this Transport Committee was to enable kind of presentation and put into public the outcomes of the engagement that happened last summer. As you recall, we engaged on the vision, the principles, and the network principles, and the objectives of the local transport plan over the course of last summer. And then today we're just coming back with all of that information, and there is a link on the Your Voice page to present the full outcomes of that. In real kind of high-level brief terms, if you like, the vision as presented, the objectives and the principles were generally well received across the piece, and they've provided us with a firm foundation from which to develop the policies for the local transport plan. Prioritising enhancements to public transport was something respondents particularly highlighted, and fixing kind of current infrastructure so that reliability, frequency, network coverage was kind of top of that priority. And feedback also consistently highlighted the need for the local transport plan to prioritise inclusivity, integration, rural transport, for example, and making sure that we prioritise how all of that works together on our streets. So this and I appreciate that's very overarching comments, but that feedback is then kind of being used now to take forward our next steps. So I guess kind of on those next steps, we're working towards a combined authority meeting in April to work towards going to do the full consultation in public in June.
Thank you. Thank you. And the local transport plan is something that this committee has had a lot of input on a number of sessions actually, so thank you very much. Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, more devolution, fantastic. I feel more powerful already, hooray. But the local transport plan is what my question is about. We in Kirklees, it's written within our constitution, this is about the flight path for the document. And I think it might be true of Wakefield as well, but don't quote me on that. It's certainly true of another one of the authorities, that it has to be passed by our cabinet and full council. So can I just ask that we make sure that there is enough time built into the process to go through our proper governance and structures?
Thank you. Councillor Kimber.
Thank you. So my question's on the consultation, a couple of areas of concern that have been discussed across at Calderdale. Include the demand management and climate emergency impacts that are referenced in the report. So the language of the draft LTP and its policy body is not as forthright on climate as we might have expected. And whilst there are inherent links between transport, economic and environmental policy that require an unambiguous decision by leaders on the renewed carbon pathway, there is a concern that the economic need may be leading to a lessening of the priority on the environmental. And then associated with this, the climate concern is a lack of language around the transport demand management in the draft LTP. It's entirely absent from the document. So at a district level can and must play a key role in dealing with these matters, but there must also be hooks in the regional policy context to provide that opportunity. Thank you.
Is it Councillor Courtney?
We also welcome the white paper and acceleration of the devolution process, and that we'll bring to West Yorkshire as a mayoral region. I think in the case of improved strategic powers and statutory functions in rail matters, it's critical that the Mayor and Combined Authority officers supporting strengthened functions engage with district partners across all levels to make sure that local knowledge is really embedded into making sure that the strategic priorities are advanced effectively. So basically, involve us, talk to us, make sure that we're, sort of like thoroughly in there. And I would say particularly around the electrification of the Calder Valley line. Didn't think that wasn't going to come up, did you? Because it was obviously is going to. I'm really sorry, but I feel like a bit of a stuck record. So I mean, we sort of know really that we've got concern that the national narrative doesn't recognise the importance of the Calder Valley line electrification, where other matters such as improved Bradford to Huddersfield connectivity are understood by government, and the electrification of the Calder Valley line. Please, can you advocate on our behalf? So if it's advocated by the region and enhanced statutory rail function, and this will, these things will help the Mayor in this endeavour. I know that it's money, and I know that it's all going on the Transpennine, and to be honest, it's not helped by the diagram in the the corridors of opportunities diagram in the local transport plan, which basically sort of takes one of the corridors of opportunity. It sort of follows the motorway route through to Manchester from sort of like from Halifax and Bradford. It seems to follow the motorway rather than the train line. And while a lot of the economic opportunity is we do understand that, but actually it sort of misses out the economic importance of the upper Calder Valley as well. So
it's always the maps that let us down, isn't it? I think it's meant to be the railway line, not the motorway. So perhaps Harrow just needs shifting.
Yeah, if you could have a look at that. I have brought it up a couple of times in a couple of different places, but I'm happy to have a further conversation.
Got Chancellor Pinnock next, and I'll come back to.
Thank you. I have a problem with democratic deficits, but I won't talk about that here because it's strictly nothing to do with transport.
A lot of councillors around the table to say we've got a democratic deficit, but carry on.
I still do have a problem, but it's not been completely finished yet. So I'm all in favour of devolution. I'm rather suspect that there won't be anybody in this room who isn't, but it's how you do it. As I say, the discussion on how you do it democratically is probably for another place rather than here. But on the local transport plan, there's some rather, somewhat disturbing figures on page 41. The responses from Calderdale and Kirklees seem to be very much lower than everywhere else, and I just wonder whether anybody has any inkling as to why this might be true, because there are people interested in transport in Kirklees and Calderdale, plenty of them, and I know quite a lot of them. The figures do seem to be much lower than everywhere else.
Okay, thank you very much. Helen, you want to address particularly the carbon deficit that Councillor Kimber was talking about? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the questions, and I appreciate your feedback. Thank you. I think just to come back to your point, Councillor Kimber, thank you and welcome those comments, and we've had conversations with your officers about that as well. I think and Councillor Kyle's so the positioning on the policies, the wording of the policies, we've tried to make it so that districts can take it to where they want to take it. Each district, obviously, the gold standard, if you like, can't be achieved by everybody at the start all at once, so it's about how that is applied in different places. So, but happy to have a further conversation with you on that, if you want, just to make sure we are appreciating where your feedback is coming from. Thank you. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. And then just to pick up on your point, Councillor Pinnock, around the responses, in terms of the overall West Yorkshire, we actually had a greater number of responses on this. And so Given this is a engagement on a vision and on objectives for a local transport plan, it's not something that you would necessarily get a lot of response from the general public because of its broadness. We actually got a significant, did well proportionally, shall we say, on the number of responses. Actually, dare I say it, we got more than Transport for the North on their strategic transport plan. In terms of percentage of, in terms of percentage of responses by district, actually they were, Kirklees and Calderdale were actually in proportion of the population size relative to other areas of West Yorkshire. So I think it's just worth clarifying that of where people live across West Yorkshire, the number of responses in those areas were relatively good.
And I suppose this plan obviously is coming to its completion. We have to have a plan, but presumably as we go forward, times change, don't they? And priorities change, and hopefully we achieve things. So when is a refresh? When is the opportunity to update this? So how often do we look at it, review?
So typically a local transport plan lasts for 10 years. However, we tend to look at reviewing it about every 5 years to make sure it's reflective. This current one our current transport strategy was adopted in 2017, but obviously since then we've had COVID, we've had a mayor, and we've had a lot of big things happen in West Yorkshire. So the time for it really is now to enable us to kind of carry forward the next stages of our transport evolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor McLaughlin, very briefly.
I don't think you mentioned the flight path and going through our governance process.
Apologies, sorry, I missed that one. So we are in conversation with your officers about timings for that. And each district, as you pointed out, is slightly different. Given our consultation, our formal statutory consultation will be for 12 weeks from hopefully start of June, all being well. We have had conversations with making sure that with your officers that it goes through your processes within that period, immediately after that period to enable us to adopt in March next year.
Can I just quickly comment on a couple of points as well, Matt, Chair? So one point is with regard to Calder Valley Line electrification. So it's in the Combined Authorities Rail Strategy, and therefore it will be in the local transport plan. And frankly, if we ever want to stop more trains at Mythen Road, for example, you need to electrify the line, because the question wasn't answered for you earlier, but the reality is you got to slow trains quicker and speed them up quicker at the stops in order to do it. So absolutely. And with regard to the concerns around consultation response, I think my advice to members would be, please don't concern yourselves too much at this stage. The consultation that we've run so far is a very high level consultation around objectives that inevitably appeals to quite a discrete audience, despite the team's very best efforts to promote it. We'll be consulting this year, as the report sets out, on a detailed plan where we actually get into what are the proposed schemes, and I think I'd anticipate that there will be considerably more response at that point. So plenty of opportunity yet for the community to get involved.
Thank you very much. So we're coming to the end of our time. There is a bus service improvement plan on there as well. Were there any burning questions to that people had before we close the meeting, to where people have transport to get to themselves? Councillor Pinnock, Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Kim, the usual four there actually. Can you very briefly answer your question?
It's just a small point.
But other people may have to leave, just so
related to something we talked about earlier, related to Chain Bar. Roundabout. I happened to speak to Kim Kane outside, and she mentioned to me that Arriva certainly have tried getting Highways England to change the timings on the traffic lights, and Highways England have flatly refused to do anything like that because they're worried that it's going to cause tailbacks on the motorway. Now, she did say to me, would the mayor have any influence in this direction? Because it does seem a really rather pathetic answer, if I can use that
Councillor
word.
Kimber?
I'm not sure I'd use that word in public, but
yeah, we are in public.
Well, all right.
Councillor Courtney?
Public. No.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. So just a very quick, again, usual. It's really important, you know, especially if we don't want to see bus patronage drop off even more, that while we're waiting in our end of the valley for franchising, that we really need to be looking at the investment, what investment we can have in our bus services in the meantime, because actually, you know, things are deteriorating. And just on that, we have no zero emission buses in Calderdale, so if we can have some of those, that would be really helpful as well, because that also enhances passenger experience, because we know that they're nicer, so as well as being good for the environment. So
neither do we in Bradford, actually, I don't think.
So,
we're all a bit
they're all in Leeds.
This is descending now. We're not getting.
We've broken out in unity here. Then.
Excellent, Councillor McLaughlin or Kimberley.
Thank you, Chair. This is on table 2. Our emerging customer principles and what it means for bus information and customer services. The last one, supported and accountable. The sentence that accompanies that doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't mention being accountable. And I think we can do better.
Thank you, Councillor Kimber. Final word. Excellent. Any other burning questions before we all depart to our next meetings? Thank you very much, everybody, for sticking with it. I know there's been a lot, but it is an opportunity really just to ask operators and hold people to account. So thank you very much for your participation this afternoon. Thank you.